Okay, here we go. It's 1 o'clock and I will call today's meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any additions to this agenda?
Hi, Your Worship. Hi. Addition of 8.3 Rural Health Week proclamation.
Okay, thank you.
And Your Worship, if I could take this opportunity to introduce a new staff member, I'll ask Mr. Shanks and Mr. LaFrance to come up and you can meet our new project manager.
Perfect. I don't get to see the camera this way.
No. Welcome to Rocky Mountain House.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. So my name is Sean LaFrance. I've taken the project coordinator with operations, and so, like I say, I'm excited to come here. Been with the city of Red Deer for 11 years, so and project coordination, design, as well as the development technician, touching a little bit on the planning sides and development. So like I say, I'm really excited to be here. It's a beautiful town out in the West Country. So
Awesome. Well, we're looking forward to getting to know you better. So welcome to Rocky Mountain House. Thanks very much.
thank you so much.
Okay. And I meant to add something I want to add to the agenda. I would just like to move from correspondence from information to correspondence for action. I'd like to move 9.9 and 9.10 and make them 8.3 and 8.4. Right. Yes, I forgot the other one. Yeah, thanks. So 8.4, 8.5. That's all I have. So just looking for a motion to accept the agenda as amended. Councillor Fraser?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. All right, moving on to 3.1. We have a delegation, the National Police Federation, Mr. Kevin Helwa, Mr. Jeff McGowan, and Miss Anna Santorum. And I will turn the floor over to you now. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to present to us.
Hello there. Thank you very much, Mayor Burke and Council, for having us. We've had a substitution. Kevin Halwa will not be participating today, and I will take his place. Michelle Boutin is my name. We're with the National Police Federation. I'm the vice president, one of 3 vice presidents, and on the line with me is one of our government relations advisors, Anna Santorum, as well as a director for the NPF, who's located as well here in Alberta, Jeff McGowan. I know we only have about 10 minutes, so I don't want to take too much of your time, and I apologize for the repetition for those of you that seen our presentation for AUMA or RUMA. We'll go over it kind of quickly here today because I think you've been prepared or provided that in advance, and if not, we'll get it to you. And if some questions come up as you kind of peruse through it, please feel free to send them to us after the fact as well. I'm also going to pop my video off here. I live out just west of Stony Plain in Spring Lake, and the internet signal is not great with kids and everybody home right now. I will say it's kind of nice to see you all there together. So it's nice to not have everybody on Zoom, I suppose. So without further ado, we'll move forward. Okay. So again, thank you for the meeting with us today. The NPF is a sole certified bargaining agent representing close to 20,000 members of the RCMP across Canada, and about 3,500 of those are here in Alberta. Clearly, we have an interest in the provincial police review that's being conducted, and we wanted to take a few moments today to present some of our findings to you. As you know, and are likely well aware because you're policed by the RCMP, most RCMP members do their entire service in the province where they were recruited from and or posted to. I myself am a 23-year staff sergeant with the force, and I've done all of my service here in Alberta. Actually kind of around your area there, I've been posted to Sylvan Lake on 2 occasions, once as a constable in 2009 And then I returned as the Ops NCO Staff Sergeant back in 2012-ish. RCMP officers are active in their communities and have deep connections with the people and communities they serve, as well as participating in many community programs. As you know, the Fair Deal panel's mandate was to engage Albertans in a conversation on how to improve the province within the Canadian Confederation. As a result of that, one of the recommendations was to create a provincial police service. The recommendation came from based on an engagement the panel had conducted with Albertans. And they had conducted a survey of about 1,000 Albertans. However, 72% of the participants were from the Calgary and Edmonton regions, which are not policed by the RCMP and is not really a great representation of the entire Alberta population. Regardless, we'd like to point out that the panel's findings showed that 35% of participants supported the idea when it came to ranking priorities. Albertans in that study had ranked the Provincial Police Service 14th out of 15 possible options. Clearly, it was not a priority for Albertans. We wondered about the depth of that recommendation, so we wanted to conduct our own polling. And in October last year, we commissioned our own online survey through Polaris Strategic Insights, and we surveyed 1,300 Albertans based on the recommendations and whether or not they take an interest in provincial police service. To get a better reflection of the Alberta population, we ensured that our survey was more proportionately weighed in the responses. 41% Calgary and Edmonton regions and 53% from the others. Our survey asked the exact same question as the Fair Deal panel's survey did. And as you can see, Albertans don't see a possible transition to a provincial police service as a solution to improving their place in the Confederation. Our survey showed that only 6% support replacing the RCMP outright, with 70% of Albertans opposed to replacing the RCMP with an expensive police service. When we look at overall support of the RCMP of those surveys, 81% served by the RCMP are satisfied with the level of service that they receive today. The next slide shows some of our methodology. I won't get too much down the road into that. Replacing the RCMP was viewed as the least helpful measure to improve Alberta's place in Canada. The majority, 53%, opposed the panel's recommendation to create a provincial police service. And as you can see on slide 7, after the participants had heard arguments, including the costs, opposition to replace the RCMP rose from 53% to 70%. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jeff, to continue.
Thanks, Michelle. So I do know we are a little pressed for time here, and we can certainly make this this presentation available to you, and we can certainly make any of our polling results available. Ultimately, as you can see on this, we're still, the RCMP has a lot of support, especially within the rural community. And once we start to clarify some of the costs associated to transitioning, it becomes an even bigger prohibition, I guess, as to changing over. If you look at slide 9, it gets into some of the demographic profile. We had conducted this in, I want to say, October, November of last year. We're looking at redoing the survey, especially now that we've kind of made more available some of the costings and some of the realities surrounding a transition more available to the people of Alberta. When we get into on the next slide, you can see where it kind of breaks down some of the costs and what it would be, or what the impact would be on the province. So you're still looking at this time, and I think those numbers probably go back to about 2019-ish. You're looking at 160 million annually from the federal government on just offsetting the costs for policing. But a lot of those issues are not necessarily addressed when you get into some of your I want to say hidden, maybe hidden is not the right word, but certainly some of your less known units, your emergency response teams, the police dog service, ED or explosive disposal unit. A lot of these things have training programs within Ottawa, for example, or police dog services. I mean, we have the kennels here, but again, that's a nationally run program. A lot of these costs would end up having to be absorbed by the province in a transition. You're looking at even things as simple as your information management and your IT, which really starts to impact budgets because, I mean, everything's on computers nowadays. You're looking at pensions, some of the costs associated to transitions, your ongoing recruiting and training. I mean, currently, of course, we have Depot that funds a lot of those costs, and we're able to bring in a relatively high number of members within the division. And I think the last time I had a meeting with our admin and personnel officer within the division here, he had explained that they've already secured, provided of course they pass Depot, 35 new recruits to come in and fill various vacancies. So that is something, again, that is going to have to be taken into account, because it's not only your actual costs, but it's a lot of those intangibles that you don't necessarily identify. Next slide, please, Anna. And just to give you an indication, so not only are you looking at your costs associated to a transition, you're looking at what your running costs would be. So the only comparators that we would have is OPP and the SQ, and you can see where our numbers would be around that same cost if we were to transition and look at funding on a yearly basis a policing service within Alberta. It's again, especially given our current financial reality and economic reality, it becomes a bit prohibitive. When you look at next slide, please. You can see where our police requests have really risen, and I think it was done with Stats Canada. I had just recently reviewed it. You can see that I think over the 2018-2019 year that they had kept stats, they had looked at a 13 million calls per service across the country. Now, that's not just RCMP, but that includes your municipal police forces. So the public had contacted the police, over 13 million times. And that's a lot, but it's especially impactful when you look at only 68,000 serving police officers. And we have within Alberta, approximately 3,500 members. So you're looking at a lot of calls coming in. And then on top of that, or in spite of that, we managed to reduce a lot of the rural crime rates. And that was done through the crime reduction units in each district. Currently, Rocky Mountain House is within the Central Alberta District. And that crime reduction unit can be deployed in various areas or capacities to combat certain crime trends. You look at the next slide, kind of gets into what we can do or how you can help. And I know that a lot of the municipalities have been impactful because they send the messages and to the provincial government, and they explain, look, basically the costs are going to end up going up, and it does not necessarily show whether or not service will increase. And the very real possibility exists that costs will go up, service will stay the same. Worst case scenario, costs go up, service is reduced because of a lot of those other factors that have not necessarily been taken into account. So we're still waiting on the Price Waterhouse Cooper. We know that the government has received it. They are currently studying it. They want to make an informed decision. We are pushing, of course, for its release. We want to ensure that it is an accurate accounting of the costs. Myself, Michelle, and the president, Brian Sauvé, were involved with PricewaterhouseCoopers and brought in after to identify some of the issues that they perhaps were not aware of. And again, your national security programs, your emergency response teams, dog services, indemnification, IT, all of this stuff was not taken into account. And I think when we look at some examples, Surrey Police, the city of Surrey is looking at replacing the RCMP, and their costs are ballooning. And I think within the last 6 months, they had initially expected $19 million, but they've already ballooned to $64 million, and they've got 800 members there. And when we're looking at the province of Alberta to suddenly expand, and given the geographical and logistical considerations, we would expect that would really, really increase. We have a website, keepalbertarcmp.ca. It contains all of our information and a lot of the polling and stats in there. We also, on the various social media platforms, have the at Keep Alberta RCMP, where again you can see where we try to put out a lot of the information. I apologize because I know that was very quick, and I know we're kind of tied for time. I wanted to leave enough if there were any questions or anything that anybody had that they may want to address, or like anything really. I mean, we're here at your pleasure.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. And I did take part in the AUMA Policing Summit. So I have seen a presentation. Michelle, I believe you were there as well. Yeah. And I just, the conversation or the general consensus at that meeting was the inconsistencies and the unknowns. And I feel that, you know, many municipalities are feeling the same way. We have 2 more letters of support for the RCMP in our agenda package today. And I know we as a municipality also sent a letter to Minister Madhu. Do you remember when we sent that letter approximately? It was a couple of months ago, but we also have sent that letter. And I know also at that summit, the city of Airdrie did their own study and found out that replacing the RCMP was going to be far more costly than having an independent police force. So those are very concerning to us. The unknowns for me are really hard to handle right now, especially in the time of the pandemic and the economic crisis and just everything that's going on right now. I just don't feel that this is the right time. So I don't have any other questions, but I'm going to open up the floor to my council. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Phillips?
I attended the AAPG conference probably about a month ago or so, and the provincial police force was one of the topics that was brought up, and a lot of the biggest obstacles was cost, simply because of the technology, the systems that are in place in the RCMP now would have to be duplicated in the province of Alberta to have our own provincial police force. So, and I believe in that conference, the city of Red Deer had actually had looked at doing their own their own police force, and they decided against that as well.
And just to that point, I had met recently with the mayor of Stony Plain, and when he had first was voted in, he too examined the costings surrounding going to a town or a municipal police force, and arrived at the same conclusion. And a lot of that makes sense. And it's funny because I was speaking with someone earlier today, and they had commented that Lloydminster, because of this push, had actually identified that if they decided to go to a provincial police force, they were looking at potentially going back to Saskatchewan, if you can believe it. So I mean, I understand a lot of people or a lot of towns don't have that possibility. But I think that really resonates, and I think I mean it's effectively cost prohibitive, and that's not even the only thing about it. I mean, we have a lot of members within this division that call Alberta home. I mean, I certainly do, and Michelle does, and we we don't want to lose it. And I view it as a reasonable expectation of somebody who's paying the bill. So if the province decides that they want to look at, are we getting the best bang for our buck? Is it something that we can get behind? Is it something that we need to reevaluate? Absolutely. But I think in the end, the evidence will demonstrate that really the RCMP certainly is the best bang for its buck. And that doesn't mean that there can't be improvements. And I know in speaking with the commanding officer, he is always open to that and wants to make things better if there are, areas where the force is falling down. But I mean, nothing's perfect, but it's always a work in progress.
Yeah, that's exactly the point that I was about to make, Jeff, was, we'll be one of the last groups to say that changes don't need to be made or that they're not necessary as time goes on. We've heard it time and time again from other chats that we've had around the province of, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And we're all for supporting reviews. I think it's smart to do them. When I was in Sylvan Lake, there was a lot of discussion about police funding with council on a regular basis. I support that. I think it makes everything better. Outside of the costs alone, I think changes need to be made, but I think they can be made at a different level. I don't know if Jeff had covered off that part of the presentation, but about communities exercising more of the rights that they have to establishing councils and community consultative groups and those types of things to affect some of that change, so that they're not constantly feeling like that pressure or that control is always being pulled from the east in Ontario and Ottawa.
In our letter to Minister Madhu, we did include that we would like him to please examine the police funding model. So really that's what we would like to see. It's a fairly old funding model, and we would like that brought up to date. So, yeah. I don't have any more questions or comments. Does anybody else have any? Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate you taking the time to come and share that with us. And I just wanted to also let you know that we do have this presentation already, so there's no need to send it. So
perfect.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for your time, and hopefully when we get out from under this COVID thing, we'll be able to come out and meet everyone in person.
That sounds great. We look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Okay, we'll move on to the adoption of the previous minutes, 4.1. Everybody had a chance to read those. Okay, Councillor Phillips.
I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes for the May 11th meeting.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Moving on to number 5.1, delegation business. So just looking for a motion to accept the delegation presentation as information. Councillor Brown?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? Carried. No old business, so on to new business. 7.1, the RFD for the wildlife attractant bylaw. Okay, turn that over to Ms. Hartling.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship and Council. So I'm sure you all recall the visit that we had from Connor Noyes with Fish and Wildlife back on April 13th. From that meeting, Council requested that administration prepare a bylaw and bring it back to Council for today's meeting. So I've done that. I would like to just point out a few things. When Fish and Wildlife when they identified some of the issues, there was issues with direct feeding, unnatural foods that were being fed to deer, sometimes bear, other wildlife. The other thing is indirectly there was feeding through garbage and dead wildlife, birdseed, and compost. So in the preparation of the bylaw, I kind of went through, and I'd like to just maybe highlight some sections of the bylaw for you so we can kind of look at that. So although wildlife falls under the federal and provincial jurisdictions, municipalities can assist in the development of bylaws that will discourage the visitation of nuisance and or dangerous animals into the urban area. One of the things that was identified was some of the instances that occur as a result of the urban wildlife conflicts. Vehicle accidents, harm to both humans and wildlife. There was over 200 occurrences in the Rocky region in 2020. So under Section 1 of the bylaw, I have outlined that the reason for that the bylaw was created was to reduce those risks associated with human-wildlife conflict. Under Section 3, under the definitions, I did talk with our senior peace officer as well as fish and wildlife officer, and so we revised the definition that would allow conservation officers as well to enforce. And so if you look at the bylaw under Section 3, it does say for peace officer that any RCMP officer, community peace officer, fish and wildlife officer, and any other designated peace officer for the province of Alberta. Under wildlife attractant, we did revise the definition a little bit as the town encourages composting. This was not included in the definition, as the guidance brochure has been included with the report from the province of Alberta, and there's recommendations in there as to how to keep composting clean, basically, that would discourage animals from getting into compost. So I've included that with the report, and one of the recommendations I would suggest is that we post that on our website for the public to be able to access that. Under Section 4, wildlife attractants, it includes the prohibition of wildlife feeding, reminding ratepayers to refrain from accumulating attractants on their property. And the other thing is the suspension, like to suspend their bird feeders so that the deer can't get into it. It kind of, to me, that was kind of like a middle ground where we could still allow the bird lovers to feed the birds, but if they're suspended, that should deter the wildlife from getting into that. Under Section 5, obstruction and Section 6, enforcement and penalties, we just outlined under there that the regulations related to any obstruction of enforcement. So, it does talk about any interference or obstruction of a peace officer who is attempting to capture or who has captured any wildlife in accordance with the provisions of this bylaw. It also references remove or attempt to remove from the possession of a peace officer any animal which has been seized, and to induce any animal to enter an area where they may be safe from capture. Those things were added into the bylaw as well, just to kind of deter those kinds of activities from occurring. And then under Schedule 8, it outlines the minimum penalty of $250 and a maximum penalty of $1,000. Subsequent and or repeat offenses may double the fine. Does council have any questions with regards to the report or the bylaw itself?
I was just going to ask about Schedule A.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain so feeding wildlife, the penalty is $250. And then what makes you get a $500 to $1,000? Oh, obstructing a peace officer. And then that's up to the peace officer to decide if it's $500 or $1,000?
That's right.
How is that determined?
Yeah, it would be the peace officer that would impose those fines.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So,
Councillor Brown?
Yeah, we recently we've had some discussions about food security, specifically the planting of fruit trees, berry bushes, and other productive greenery. We haven't moved on that yet, although I have to say I support that initiative wholly. But I'm wondering how going forward on either of these initiatives we don't create some conflict with the two of them. And specifically, I was looking at sections 3.5 of the draft bylaw, 4.1 and 4.3. that kind of would nix the food security aspect, which would be, in my view, a shame.
So just to respond to that, we did not include fruit trees in our attractant bylaw because of council's initiative with the food security. I do think, it's not a bad idea for us to maybe communicate to the public the importance of picking up fruit that has fallen from the trees, like your crab apples and things like that. But we did not include, fruit in the attractant bylaw because for that specific reason is the importance of food security as well. So.
Yeah, I think I can't remember which section it is, but one actually says rotten fruit. So if you've got an apple tree or a fruit tree on a boulevard and the fruit falls, who's going to pick up the fruit? Once it falls and once it starts rotting. So, is that not going to be problematic for us down the road?
So what section was that? 4.1 and?
I think it might. 4.3B. Accumulation of rotten, spoiled, or moldy food left openly accessible.
Yeah, so I'm in that regard, I think there's the references more to, garbage, not to, because we removed fruit from the attractant. I think that if it's, to me, there's a middle ground because council is looking at the security of, the food initiative and to have fruit trees and berry trees available. Because we didn't include it in the wildlife attractant definition, I would think that it would not fall under 4.3B, because it says no person shall allow the accumulation of wildlife attractants, and we've defined that, so.
Yeah, okay, my concern is that we're telling residents to do one thing and yet we're allowing something else to happen. That's the only point I want to make.
Mr. Coast, did you?
Yeah, Your Worship, and Councillor Brown is actually correct. We're kind of in a gray area there. Like in the first draft of the bylaw, fruit trees was actually included, but then understanding that council also wants the other program, we took it out. I can see how it can be read as the accumulation of edible materials on the property. So I think the interpretation of this bylaw, maybe we need to make it clearer, is if the fruit hit the ground, then you're required to, make sure you pick it up. And trees are probably trimmed to a level where it's not accessible. So we might need to go back and clarify this.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, I was just looking at the wildlife attractant definition. It doesn't fruit trees are not listed, but food and food products are listed. So that could easily still be translated as a fruit tree. So if we're taking it out, it should be explicitly removed, I think. And I like the ideas of trimming the trees and removing what's fallen.
Councillor Fraser?
I guess my concern was this last week, the deer came through and ate all of the flowers in my front yard, all the way down to nothing. So they came in for those. So I guess my question is, that was a wildlife attractant. At what point are we being overly controlling? I didn't plant the crabapple tree in my backyard. I clean it up as much as I can, but there's lots of deer that jump my fence and can get to it. So should I guess my question is, I have no problem against direct feeding and saying, no, you can't put out a box of apples for the deer and bring them in. But so long as you're reasonably maintaining your garden or your trees, I feel like $250 to $1,000 is a pretty steep fine for having something that the deer can eat on your property when we're trying to encourage people to garden.
Councillor Auld? Excuse me.
We got to remember what the intent of Connor's issue was when he came here. It was specifically the putting out of deer attractant, deer food, specifically targeting the animals. So we got to be pretty careful on how we word the fruit trees and whatnot, but the intent of it was to negate the people that are actually actively feeding the wildlife. So I don't know if this is too deep or we just need to exclude some stuff, but.
Yes, and I would agree with that. It was more to specifically actually feeding human food to the animals. So am I hearing then, Ms. Hartling, that you'll just take out a few of these and bring this back to us at a future?
Yeah, I can do that, Your Worship. I can actually bring back and I'll clarify, maybe the falling of fruit and trimming of trees, and then bring the bylaw back, if that works for council.
So, we don't want anybody getting a fine because they have a fruit tree in their yard.
Right.
And that's not going to happen.
Yeah, but that's why we did not include it in the wildlife attractant bylaw.
Right.
And so we could maybe write something in to clarify that. And then does council want me to also kind of review the penalties as well? Do you want those reduced, or?
What's council's wish? Councillor Narang?
Yeah, just going back to what Dave was saying, and I think it's clear in the wildlife attractant definition, speaking to what Councillor Fraser was talking about as well, because there's no reference to to flowers in what the attractant is, so I don't think there's a risk of that. And the attractant does really outline what the intent of the presentation was with regards to the garbage and the pet food and that sort of thing. So if we have a bylaw that maintains the spirit of don't deliberately feed the wild animals and maintain a property where you're picking up your fruit, then I don't have a problem with the fine, because the bylaw speaks to the deliberate nature of what's happening. So I don't think that we would need to reduce the fine if we had a clearer bylaw and what the expectation was.
I think I'm hearing that we're looking at planting fruit trees and food security, and I think that's where we're going with this. Is it's a double standard. We're looking at planting more animal attractant trees, and then we're asking people to just maybe not so much, or make sure that they're picked up.
So, Your Worship, just for clarification, I think we need to revisit the whole bylaw, because I think what I'm hearing from council is it's not the wildlife attractant isn't really what we're after here. It's the intentional feeding of wildlife. So that actually requires us to review the whole bylaw, if that's council's intent.
That's exactly what I'm hearing.
That's exactly what.
He just wanted us to be able to have some teeth when people were putting out the oats and putting out the crab apples for them. That's what he wants to address, not.
And I think in the fall, a good public education as well on, make sure you pick the fruit from your trees. And I think it's just a good reminder for people to make sure that happens.
Your Worship, I just wanted to comment that we can bring this back. I'll kind of revise the bylaw so it's more for specific, like an intentional feeding. And then just to confirm, if we go that route, is everybody okay with the fines as they are then?
Yep,
Okay.
I certainly am.
Okay. Okay, I will bring that back in maybe the second council meeting in June, if that works.
Sure.
Okay, I
We'll
think
leave
it's
this
the
already.
8th.
Okay, that sounds good. Do you need a motion to just accept?
Yeah, Your Worship, council can just pass motion that council postpone bylaw 2021-05 to the June 8th council meeting with revisions to specifically address feeding of wildlife, intentional feeding of wildlife.
Okay. Councillor Brown?
Yeah, and I'll make that motion.
All right. All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Okay, thanks for all of that, Ms. Hartley.
No, you're very welcome.
Okay, so we'll move on to 7.2, the responsible pet ownership bylaw. Mr. Schwader?
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. I brought in Community Peace Officer Whistle to help with any questions that Council may have in regards to our responsible pet ownership bylaw. our past and our draft that I'm going to propose today. So at our 2020 service level review, we discussed the pet responsible bylaw, as well as the costs and fees that are associated with cats within our community. We presently have a kenneling contract with Roar that will end in June 30th of this year, 2021. Presently, we residents as well as peace officers have the opportunity to drop off the stray cats, cats that they trap at Roar for a fee that's associated or comes back to the community. In my RFD, I've kind of indicated what the annual costs are. We started in 2018 for 6 months. 2021 is for 6 months as well. So you could say the average is roughly $31,000. $24,000 of that is for the retainer fee for the Roar to contract with them. And the additional costs are when pets or animals are brought into the Roar building, for whether they're stray, at large animals. And those average costs are roughly $7,000 that the town pays for. With this new bylaw, we're introducing that cats are not included in the responsible pet bylaw. It'll just be for dogs. We will be responsible for, say if my officer picks up an injured cat and takes it to a vet for treatment, we will be responsible up to a certain amount for pain management and to put the cat or animal at ease. It's up to either our peace officer or the vet to decide if that animal will need to be put down after the costs get too high. If we are unable to locate the owner, whether through chip or registration. So I also included the animal registration stats as far as dogs and cats for the last 3 years. As of May of this year, we have 609 dogs registered. Cats are 202. You can see the stats for 2020 was 712 dogs. Cats are 226, and dogs were 774 in 2019 and 241 for 2019. So whether there's more cats that we not know of out there or people aren't registering their cats, that we do not know. But as far as majority of the costs that are incurred by the town are mainly for stray cats and injured cats, either at Roar or at the vets. So this bylaw 2021-07, I'm looking for council's consideration to do first reading today and do second and third reading on June 8th at the 7 p.m. council meeting. Any questions for myself or CPO Whistle?
I have a question about the registration fees. Does that go directly to cover the cost for Roar then?
It does. Well, partially. Like we roughly bring in about $22,000 in registration fees per year, which is roughly $9,000 less than what our costs to do animal control within the community.
Okay. Councillor Fraser?
I guess my concern with removing cats is that the reason we're removing cats is there are a lot of really irresponsible cat owners. And I didn't like where it's no longer an offense to have your cat dig up your neighbor's garden and spray all over everything. And I understand that a lot of the cost from Roar comes from those cats, but I'm just not sure that saying, okay, well, we're just not going to pay attention to it. It's not on the books anymore, so it's not our problem. I don't think that solves the problem of there being too many stray cats and too many unfixed cats.
Counselor Phillips?
So at the service level review, we talked about dogs and cats. The majority of dogs that are ultimately picked up are claimed by their owners, correct? And the majority of cats that are dropped off are not picked up by the owners, correct? And that's what our topic of discussion was that we're spending $31,000 a year for cats. And not that cat owners are irresponsible, I'm not saying that. However, the majority of cats that are dropped off are not picked up. And we need the pet owners to understand that they're responsible for their animal. The dog owners seem to be very responsible for it, the cat owners don't. And it's costing the town of Rocky Mountain House a lot of money to deal with these cats. I'm in support of this bylaw.
So just to clarify though, it's about an extra $9,000 once you take the revenue from the licenses for the cats and the dogs. We're still saying that cats must have a license. So we'll still be bringing that revenue in.
No, cats will not be required to have a license.
They won't be required
No.
to have a license.
No. If we're not going to be responsible for them, then we won't be collecting a fee on them. It'll just be for dogs. If owners want to put a tag or they want to come in and get a tag, they're more than welcome, but we're not mandated to get a tag. But say if they do want to, say if their cat does go missing, at least it's a mechanism for us to return that cat if it is turned in.
Do we know how many other municipalities do it this way? Like, or would we be like, I don't know,
Like
not responsible?
not responsible. I'll let CPO whistle
Okay,
because she did a little research in regards to other communities.
okay, thanks.
Yes, last week I made about 15 calls and all of them did have cats included in the bylaw. It was very hard to find one that did not.
Councillor Narang, did you have a question?
Yeah, but none of my microphone screams at me. Oh, okay, thank you. That almost made me lose my train of thought. Is it possible to, like, is there another way or another bylaw that covers what Councillor Fraser was talking about, where somebody's animal is causing property destruction or whatever on their land that's outside of this bylaw?
I would say it'd probably fall under this existing bylaw, if any.
Councillor All, do you have your hand up or you're, yep, okay.
We're talking about feral cats here. We're not talking about typically homeowners' cats that are getting turned in. We're talking about the gross overabundance of feral cats that we're dealing with on a daily basis. It's costing us huge money. It's not the fact that we're trying to penalize cat owners. It's the fact that we're trying to recoup costs on looking after feral cats that nobody's claiming, nobody's paying for, nobody has any desire to keep. So I'm 100% in favor of this.
Councillor Fraser?
My other concern would be if we're not covering cats under the responsible animal bylaw, what happens to that limit where I was like, I'm only allowed 3 cats. Am I now allowed 87 cats? If the problem is feral cats, then I think we should address feral cats and not just take them off the list. If we need, I guess, what's the status of the contract with Roar? What's going on going forward after the 30th?
Ideally, we have approached them in regards to housing a dog. Like say if we have dogs at large and the officers catch one and we need to, put that dog for safekeeping. We have made arrangements with Roar that we would pay one-off fees in regards to that animal. If it's not claimed, like say they would charge us $200 for housing that animal. If it's claimed, it would be paid for by the owner. If it's not claimed, we would have to pay the $200 moving forward. So there's no retainer fee. We're just paying for animals that are brought in. When I say animals, dogs that are brought in starting July 1st.
So there's no contract with Roar, it's just on a per dog?
Per animal basis, per dog basis, yes. Yeah.
Councillor Narang?
I think, and I think it's telling that Kayla couldn't find another town that was taking cats out of their bylaw. I think we need to really look at that and understand why that might be. And maybe there's, I guess my question would be, what is our feral cat status? Like, do we have a feral cat issue?
Yes. Yeah, we predominantly deal a lot with feral cats. And when a feral cat is brought in, us as a town, we actually get charged more per feral cat that Roar takes care of because it's a lot harder to handle. We do get a fair amount of cats that come in with a chip and a tattoo. Contact is always attempted to be made with the owner, but still very few in between owners do come forward for their cats. So we hold them for 2 different periods of time. There's 3 days or 10 days, and both are for dogs and cats. And that's under the Animal Protection Act of provincial legislation. So if there is form of identification via chip, tattoo, or obvious signs of it being a purebred animal, we have to hold for 10 days while trying to make contact with the owner. If there's none of those present, we're only required to hold it for 3 days. So currently when we bring an animal in, we're responsible for them for 3 days. After that, the animal becomes property of Roar.
Can I follow up? So I guess my follow-up question would be, if we stop dealing with cats, and maybe you can or can't answer this question, what do you anticipate would be the issue? How would we fix the issue of feral cats? Or do you see that growing if we stop dealing with them altogether under this bylaw?
Gosh, I think it's hard. I mean, us as a town, we tried to do the spay neuter chip program, and I think we were anticipating a lot larger response from animal owners within the town. I would have to get the correct number, but I think we've only done around 35 of them, which isn't a lot, and a lot of them are like 2 to 3 cats per household. So, I mean, I think it's still always going to be an issue. If there is no enforcement, it may become a larger issue. I think it's really hard to anticipate. The city of Okotoks do not have cats in their bylaw, and they still have an issue with it. The issue that they have with cats is also just animal activists wanting cats to be recognized as animals.
Councillor Auld?
The 98% of extra fees above the monthly $2,000 is all from cats. So we've done nothing to deal with the feral cats to begin with. We're not going to solve it by keeping them in that bylaw. It's just an expense that we need to figure out a different way of dealing with, I think.
Councillor Fraser?
And I think, to me, we need to sit down with Roar and say, okay, here are all these extra costs, here are the cats coming in, these are the kinds of cats that are coming in. What is a reasonable amount of time? Because I understand that, paying 10 days for a cat that is probably not going to have an owner come forward, that does need to be looked at. But because Roar is doing this every day, because they are seeing the paws on the ground, I just think there's got to be a better way than just taking them out of the bylaw, because that doesn't solve the problem. It just makes it somebody else's problem.
Has there been what kind of conversation did you have with Roar? Do they have suggestions?
We met with Roar back in December to talk about the contract. As far as contract not continuing, we did talk to him about the dog one-offs as far as them coming in. We could approach them in regards to I think the retainer fee is the big costs, and whether those costs, maybe we eliminate the retainer fee and maybe we pay just for the cat as they come in. You know, maybe we can still continue doing that, but maybe not with the retainer fee of $2,000. I think that's, you know, roughly $7,000 in a year for the kenneling of stray cats and cats that are coming in. Maybe, you know, maybe more user-friendly for the town in regards to the costs. That's an option. We haven't addressed that with ROAR, but that's a possibility moving forward. Instead of the retainer fee, we just pay the one-offs, similar to what we do for the dogs.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Cox.
Your Worship, just to add to the conversation, I guess. So my previous municipalities, we did not have a cat bylaw. It was the Humane Society that took up the role of feral cats, and they obtained their money through either a grant through the town or through fundraising and so forth. But it was the Humane Society that took that role. And it's also a question for council on service levels of where do you want your peace officers to focus? If it's a large lot of time with cats, what are we giving up on other enforcement? So that's part of council's consideration of where we want to focus our peace officers to.
But we don't have a humane society in town, right? ROAR. So that's what I think. We just need to have a better, like a more in-depth conversation with ROAR. I just feel like we're missing something here. I mean, none of us want these costs for the cats, none of us. But I just believe that there may be another way that this can be handled that's more cost effective. And I think if we could just talk to ROAR. Councillor Phillips?
So, I mean, we have this bylaw in place now and we're not winning the war on feral cats. Without the bylaw, I don't see the status quo changing a lot, other than the fact that we're not responsible for feral cats anymore. The domesticated cats, I don't see that as being as big of an issue because those are responsible pet owners. They're looking after their animals. Having the town responsible for feral cats at this cost, and as Mr. Krause had indicated, it's not just the financial cost, it's the time that our peace officers are spending on these animals as well. I think there's, to me, I definitely like this bylaw.
I just feel like there's a lot of questions that we don't have answers to right now, so therefore I'm just not comfortable with the bylaw at this point. I think we do need to do some more investigating. I think there's a lot of good in here, but I still think we need to have a bigger conversation with ROAR, our humane society in town. Councillor Fraser?
Well, just extending on what you were saying with the conversation with ROAR, I know that previous to them having that contract, there was a grant from the town. So there's definitely different ways that we can do this with ROAR. I don't want to be paying too much money for something they don't think is helping the animals. So yeah, I think we should sit down with them and see where their stresses are, where they're funding, where they're spending all the money, where we're spending all the money, and whether there's a setup that works for us and the animals.
Councillor Auld?
If we're gonna have more discussions with ROAR, would you be able to find out what percentage of cats that are brought in are euthanized at the end of the day?
You don't mean the end of the day. You mean at the end of 10 days, right?
Yeah,
Sorry, I could speak to that. So ROAR is a no-kill shelter. The only circumstance that they will put an animal down is if it is way too feral, which has happened, where it wouldn't succeed in a household or even on a farm because it's just too aggressive, or the animal is unfortunately just unable to get fixed. That's the only time that they ever euthanize them, not just because they can't get adopted. If their shelter is overrun, they do ship them to other shelters to get adopted, if that helps. Yeah. But we could still find out how many do.
That's
Okay. Councillor Schwader, Mr. Schwader.
Your worship and council, when we met with Roar in December, we also, or Senior Peace Officer Schmales and I, we did discuss as far as, thinking of ideas from Roar in regards to presenting something to us. Even with the last round of grant applications, we also asked them to do something with cats as well. So we can go back to them and ask them if they want to, think of a program that may benefit the cats within the community. But just to let you know that we did ask for possible proposals for the cats.
Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I think, if we're spending this much money on cats, we must be putting some sort of cap on the problem. Like, we must be at least holding it to a certain level, or else we wouldn't be spending, it wouldn't be costing us that much. We wouldn't have that many cats. So my fear is that if we just take it all together, that the little bit of difference that we're making right now is just going to explode completely unchecked. So I agree that we need to have something in place, whatever that looks like.
Go ahead.
And just to further that too, any cat that does currently go into Roar that does not become unclaimed or does not get claimed, Roar does go ahead with a procedure to get it spayed or neutered. So by the time that it leaves the shelter, that animal is spayed or neutered, and those costs do come from Roar. I know they have a partnership with the vet clinics in town to do it at a discounted rate. So I guess that's one of the positives of the animals going there, is that they end up getting spayed or neutered at the end of the day. But there you go.
Roar has been the provider for quite a few years for cats and dogs, correct?
As far as under our contract, since July of 2018.
But before that, did they just come for grant? They just came for grant. I can't recall.
Yeah, they just came for an annual grant. I think in November they would ask for during budget time.
And then the animals were then taken to Red Deer, to a shelter?
Previous, we used to deal with a different kenneling system, yes.
Right. So now that Roar's here, they have a kennel, they're set up. So I would like to see just a more in-depth conversation with Roar, if that's a possibility. What are the rest of council's wishes? Councillor Auld?
I'm not trying to be argumentative, but at our service level, we decided that this was not where we wanted to go. At our service level, we said that we want to clear our hands of it. So I'm not quite sure why we're going back to square one.
I agree with you, but I don't believe we've had a deep enough conversation with Roar. We still have 202 people coming in to get a license for their cats. So what are they going to do with those then? Like, what happens to those? They just don't have to worry about a license anymore. And so then that's the message we're setting, is there's no, basically, it's a free for all for cats. To me, I think it's going to create a bigger problem. That's my feeling. Councillor Fraser?
Not to be morbid, but at the point where we say, this isn't we wash our hands of it and say, we're not doing cats, citizens may be looking at taking it into their own hands if they make a call and say, hey, this cat's in my garden, what am I supposed to do? And they're saying, well, that's not us. We're looking at poisoned animals, we're looking at drowned animals. It's not, when there is no legal recourse for them to deal with that, we're putting animals at risk, and feral or not, I'm not really happy with that.
Councillor Phillips?
I would sure hope that the residents of Rocky Mountain House wouldn't be that cruel and inhumane to animals. Having said that, back to what Councillor Auld had said, this is something we did talk about at our service level retreat. We identified it as too much money being spent on cats. I don't mind if we have a little further discussion, but from my point of view, I'm fine with this bylaw as is. But if the rest of council wants to have more discussion with Roar, I'm okay with that. But I'm definitely not okay with having to spend this much money and time and energy on feral cats.
I think I should be clear that nobody here at this table wants to spend this kind of money on kenneling cats. But I do think that I'm hearing that we just need to have a bigger conversation with Roar and find out if there's a better solution before we completely throw this whole thing out and we end up with possibly an unintended consequence. So, Councillor Narang?
Yeah, I don't think that I think we're sticking with what we spoke about at the service level review. But I think we're also being responsible ourselves. I mean, we don't want to wash our hands of something. We want to make sure that the problem is still being taken care of somehow. And I think that's where the conversation with Roar needs to come in, because we will be, I agree, the unintended consequences are really what we're trying to avoid here, because I don't want to spend $30,000 a year on cats either.
Yeah, we've all agreed that's a lot of money and it needs to be looked at. So we're going around the table now. So what would council like to do? I'm hearing have a more in-depth conversation with Roar. Should we have Roar in as a delegation, or do you want to have a conversation with Roar individually, Mr. Schrader?
I was going to say, let us have an initial discussion with them in regards to possible proposals, maybe reduce costs in regards to the contract, maybe an option in regards to just covering the fees for the animals that are actually coming in to that kenneling system that they have over there, and we'll see how the discussion goes from there.
Okay, so I guess just a motion, we're looking for motion then to Councillor Fraser.
I'll make that motion. I'd like to move to make contact with Roar and set up a meeting to look at cost reduction options for animal control.
Everybody clear on that motion? Okay, all in favor of that motion? That's carried. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 8.1, Seniors Week 2021 Declaration. Okay. Okay, so we've had an email again to proclaim June 7th to June 13th as Seniors Week. I think it's we've done this in the past, and I know we've asked for a more inclusive or exhaustive or a easier way to have a proclamation. So I would definitely like to make the motion to proclaim June 7th to June 13th as Seniors Week. And with that also, I know last year, I, on behalf of the town council or town, delivered ice cream and goodies to each seniors complex in town. And I would like to suggest that we do that again this year and possibly pair up with Clearwater County as well. And just take some treats just to let the seniors know. I mean, this has been a long go for them. And just to let them know we're thinking of them even more this year than, I mean, we're thinking of them always, but just the extra stress that they're under right now is pretty hard for everybody. So I know there is a seniors housing meeting tomorrow, Councillor Brown.
That's correct.
And I have talked to Reeve Laird, and she is certainly open to partnering with us on this. So if you could bring this up tomorrow at your seniors housing meeting to see what types of treats would be suitable, what we can even do right now, because we don't know that, so.
Will do.
Okay. All right, so everybody in favor of the motion to declare Seniors Week for from June 7th to 13th, 2021? Okay, and that's carried. And also in my conversation with Reeve Laird, they didn't receive this declaration, so she's wondering if we could forward that to the county council as well for their agenda package for next week. Okay, thank you. Moving on to 8.2, we have Intergenerational Day Declaration. Okay. Sorry, my computer is not loading. Please, because it's only halfway through here. Sure, just to maybe explain what we're being asked to declare. I think, does everybody have theirs open in front? Oh, there, mine's here now. Okay. Councillor Narang, I guess I'm going to ask you, is this something that you, in your organization?
This is the first this is actually the first that I've heard of it, but it does seem relatively new anyways. So yeah, I haven't heard of this before.
So what are council's wishes on this one, on this declaration? Councillor Narang?
I like that, does it say New Brunswick has just declared it in perpetuity? I think that's great. I mean, I don't think there's any harm in declaring these days, and the intergenerational day is quite interesting, actually. So I'm in favor of it.
Councillor Phillips, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I mean, reading what this is all about, I mean, Intergenerational Day is about seniors and youth talking to each other, you know, passing on information from old to new, from new to old, you know, will help with mental issues. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do this.
Councillor Fraser?
And I know that this year, a lot of our programs have been put on hold, but I know that the community does several intergenerational programs with the kids sending artwork and whatnot. So it might be a good week to highlight some of the programs that are intergenerational that we have from, I think FCSS puts on a lot of them, but I'm sure there's others.
I believe some of the schools, when they were able to, would also go read at the some of the seniors' homes. So yeah, I think this is great, and I will make the motion to declare June 1st as Intergenerational Day in Rocky Mountain House. Any other comments around that? Okay, all in favor of that motion? That's carried. Ms. Hartling, can you please also send this one over to the county when you send the other one? Because Reeve Laird was interested in this as well. Okay, thank you. So now on to 8.4, the Selenium Report. I just asked to bring this
Your
out.
worship, did we miss one? 8.3 Rural Health Week?
Oh, darn it, I didn't write it on this section. Sorry, yes, 8.3. Right.
Difference between a declaration and a proclamation?
Okay, where is the date? May 24th. So we have another proclamation in front of us. It's to declare the week of May 24th to May 28th as Alberta Rural Health Week in the town of Rocky Mountain House. What are council's wishes? Councillor Phillips?
I'll make the motion to proclaim May 24th to 28th Alberta Rural Health Week.
Okay, all in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Thanks for that, guys. Missed that. So now on to 8.4, the Selenium Report. I just asked to have this one brought forward because I just want to bring it to the public's attention that this has come in. It was presented during the coal presentations. So, and also I don't understand it. So is that what it means? It just means there's nothing in the water, right?
Yeah, your worship. So selenium is less than 0.0002 parts per million.
Okay, so there's no selenium, pretty much nothing in our water right now, currently. Nothing measurable. Okay.
That's just the smallest test.
Does anybody else have any questions? Was I the only one that didn't understand that? Okay, Councillor Auld?
I don't have any questions on it, but that's why I asked for Rob to bring it back, because I wanted to see exactly what was in here as a base measurement before or if the coal mines proceed. At least we have something on record saying as of June 1st, there's nothing. So that's, thanks, Rob.
And can I also point out that I did receive a message from a citizen this weekend stating that they were appreciative of this baseline test. So thank you for bringing that forward. Okay. So then I guess I just need a motion now to accept the selenium report as information. Councillor Auld? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. And then I also asked to have the 8.5, the real estate data brought forward, because I think this is very interesting information. Except my computer is completely not working now. It shows some pretty interesting data with our real estates, with our units being sold. And so to me, it looks pretty positive. I mean, I know I'm seeing a lot more sold signs around town, so I hope that this is a good sign, and we're starting to sell homes. I mean, I'm comparing it to even the average days of the house on the market. Like you look at the one in September of 2018, like those were fairly high numbers of dates, and mind you, I guess we have a couple in January here, but still, I think it looks like a pretty positive report, and I just wanted to bring it forward for the public to be aware that this report is here. Councillor Phillips?
Emmett, it's great for the public to see this. We're following, a trend that's going through Alberta right now, so it's good to see that Rocky is definitely on a positive trend.
We're seeing it to the west of us as well in BC. We're hearing about the prices and the homes that are for sale there, and hopefully it's a trend that's going to continue. Councillor Fraser?
The other thing that I thought was quite interesting is how stable the average house price seems to be. That there's some bumps there in 2014, 2015, which we all know what was going on then. But a lot of what I hear is, my house has lost all this value and whatever. But it really hasn't. It's kind of floated around that 250,000 mark. So that was interesting to me. I would have thought that there was much more of a fluctuation, but it's been pretty stable.
Councillor Phillips?
Just one note in that graph is yearly data can get skewed depending on what price point is selling in that particular year. So that can get skewed from year to year just because of what properties are selling.
Well, I hope it's on a trend upward for our overall assessment again. So I just thought it was a positive document, and really wanted to bring it forward so that the public could take a look at it. So any more comments? Okay, just a motion to accept the real estate data report then as information. Councillor Brown, all in favor of that motion? Carried. Okay, just looking for a motion to accept 9.1 to 9.8 for correspondence for information. Councillor Phillips?
I'll make that motion.
All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Onto the administrative reports. How's everybody doing? Do we need a couple minute break, or we can keep going? Okay. All right, 10.1 CAO report. Mr. Kraus.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report's in front of council. It's a pretty normal month for the CAO office and lead services and communications. So if council has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Any questions for Mr. Kraus? Okay, seeing none, I'll make a motion to accept CAO report as written, as presented. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Moving on to 10.2, the department reports, the director's report. We have recreation and community services first. Does anybody have any questions or anything that has to be brought forward? Councillor Fraser?
I just wanted to touch base quickly about the spray park. I know that initially we had hoped to do the grand opening on the 20th and that the install of the shade structures was the week of the 25th. Is the spray park being turned on and when is that happening?
Yes. To answer your question, Councillor, the winterizing or unwinterizing happened last Friday. We plan to flip the switch on Thursday, as was originally scheduled, so Thursday at noon. And it'll be open through the long weekend. And then unfortunately, because of the timing of installing the shade structures and the construction that will be happening, will be closed for that week from the 25th to the 30th. And then assuming the weather cooperates with the pouring of concrete slabs and those types of things, the plan would be to open again for May 31st for the rest of the season.
How is this working with the restrictions, though?
The province has, playgrounds, spray parks, those are all still permitted to happen. We'll provide signage that the people will follow the provincial regulations as they've been set out with the gathering sizes of family groups only. And they have to maintain that 2-meter spacing in outdoor spaces, but it is a permitted facility, recreation facility that's permitted to be open.
Okay. So I guess who monitors that then? AHS or?
Yeah, it's on a complaint basis that if people have concerns, they would contact AHS.
Okay. Thank you. Or comments or questions for Mr. Ament? No? Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to corporate services. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Quinlan? Councillor Fraser.
I had somebody ask about Centennial Park's the online booking, and I guess that might be both of you, because I know it was the new program, and I wasn't sure if that was running through corporate services or, sorry.
I can respond to that question. As part of the Perfect Mind recreation software, we have the capability to do online registrations. We're not there yet. So at this point, the campground will open on Friday for the season. Same operations, first come, first serve, and doing self check-ins, and our staff will monitor that. We're having discussions internally as to how we would roll that out, because we've advertised in the campground guide that it's first come, first serve. So we're still working on plans for when we could implement an online booking and payment system.
Would that be partially first come, first serve, or would we go to a book, half of it being able to book and half is first come, first serve?
I would anticipate that once we move to an online booking system, that's the entire thing. We wouldn't have a first come, first serve process.
Does it have to be that way?
We can explore other options of leaving some campsites of the 15 that are there, leaving some of them on first come, first serve, and some of them not. It might be a little confusing for people that are looking to book online, and as we would promote whether you want a site with power or an unserviced site or not, it might create a little bit more logistic issues for us. I'm not aware of other campgrounds that give you the option of first come, first serve or reservation.
Good, Councillor Old, yeah. Any other questions for, thanks, Mr. Ament. Any other questions for corporate services? Okay. Seeing none, we have planning and community development. Mr. Schwader. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Schwader?
No.
No. Okay, I don't. And, Councillor Auld?
How many extra police services, community police have we got coming in for the May long weekend?
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Just curious how many more members are coming in for the long weekend that would have to do with protective services?
As far as, are you talking RCMP or?
RCMP, in the past, has our members not helped out with the RCMP?
Senior Peace Officer Schmelz hasn't notified me of anybody outside our area coming in. I know people in previous years have come from, say, Stettler area and Red Deer into our area, but I haven't been notified that they are. I don't think they're doing a check stop either this year because of COVID.
That's interesting. They just did a check stop the other day.
I'm sorry, Councillor Auld?
I just found that interesting. They just did a big check stop on Highway 11 last week. I think it was last week, maybe 2 weeks. But
yeah, that was before the restrictions that came through. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for planning and community development? Thanks, Mr. Schwader. And we have engineering and operations. Does anybody have any questions? Or Rob, did you have anything, Mr. Shanks?
Just a couple of updates. Good news for a change. 54th Street, the CN warning system is being delivered as we speak.
Nice.
So install for that should be mid-June if everything goes well.
Perfect.
The water meter program went very well. That should also be completed this week, at the end of this week. And the organics program for the carts, the first load is on its way here from Quebec. So
nice.
Robert, Quinn Park.
Oh, yes.
I was
So
gonna ask.
an update with Quinn Park. We hired the contractor to come in to do the work. Started off a little bit rocky. We pushed the issue with them. Wes knows about the company. Too bad we didn't know about it earlier. Not the most professional out there. They've built the park, but there was lots of deficiencies with what is there right now. So we kept it closed for the winter. They didn't have enough time to replace and repair what they needed to. They've committed to the end of this week, which now is going to be extended out because of the rain. But they are supposed to come in and remove a lot of the anchors that go into the ground because the posts are crooked. They wanted to do one thing. They wanted to cut the posts off, re-weld them with plates and move them over, but we said no. We didn't agree with that. That's not what we paid for, and that's not what was in the contract. So we're just waiting basically for them to come back in, remove, replace the parts that we asked for, and we go from there.
Okay, so we should see it probably in June, early June, hopefully.
Yeah. I wouldn't bet on it. We're gonna put a timeline the end of July. It has to be done. If it's not done, we're gonna look at other means. We do have another playground company coming in to do Arrowhead Park. We're not gonna have that issue again. We're the actual playground for Arrowhead, we're leaving it there. And the new playground is gonna be in the same area, just moved over slightly. And then once it's built, we'll take out the original playground, and we're hoping that company will go and finish off Quinn
Okay,
for us.
okay. So there was a holdback then.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Kate, that's great. Thanks for the update. Okay. Councillor Auld?
Do you know what percentage of the water meters is done? You said it went well, but how many is left to do?
Maybe 30 or less?
Percent?
No, 30 meters.
Meters.
Really?
It exceeded everybody's
Yep.
expectations, actually.
Excellent.
Yeah, a very good program. Can't say enough about Neptune and how professional they are. We have received a lot of compliments on them going into people's houses and just being professional. So yeah, great program. Finally
Yeah, it was so quick. I mean, they were in our house and out in 20 minutes. They were so quick and it was painless.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Shanks? Okay, thank you. So just a motion, please, to accept the director's reports as both written and presented, I guess. Councillor Auld? All in favor of that motion? That's carried. So we are on to the action list. Does anybody have anything you see on the action list?
Your worship, just to answer Councillor Fraser's inquiry about food security. So administration looked back at the records and it wasn't from the COVID task force. Actually, it was actually from the town hall on COVID that the idea came up.
Right.
So that was just a suggestion at that time, but there's been no direction or action taken any further than that.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions on the action list? No. Councillor Fraser?
So if we wanted to discuss that further, would I need to make a motion to bring that back, or?
Yep, so your worship, that would be like a notice of motion that you want to bring it back for council's discussion.
Okay, no other comments, so just a motion to accept the action list as presented. Councillor Narang?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor of that motion? Carried. Does anybody have any administrative inquiries? So I had a request just before coming in here to council. Friday is Early Child Educators Day. And so I had a request if we can please acknowledge our early child educators on Friday. And I'm wondering if we can do something on our social media to show our appreciation. If that's a possibility.
I can probably make that happen for you, Mayor.
Okay. Do we need a motion then, Dean, for that, or it just?
Your worship will take that as
A minute inquiry, okay. Okay. No, oh, sorry. Any notices of motion? Councillor Fraser?
I guess I would like to give a notice of motion. I would like to have us look at our food security policy and integrate that with our planting and tree policy. If that is what makes the most sense.
Okay. Good with that, admin?
Your worship, just for clarification, so we can provide council with some background. So with our tree planting policy, you wanted incorporated in there that fruit trees are part of that policy? Okay.
Any other notices of motion? No? Okay. So seeing none, it is 2:32. I'll call a 5-minute break, and when we come back, we'll be going into closed session.